Hi, everyone. I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Nick Peck, a former college football player and an author of The Only Way Out. Nick, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super grateful to be here.
So I am so excited to talk with you. You messaged me on Instagram like a couple weeks ago, and I'd seen your book, and I'm in the process of reading it. And I just felt like your story and just the theme and everything that's in your book is such a good topic to come on. Let's talk about it about and talk about. Tell us a little bit about your book, a little bit about your background. I feel like it's best to give you that because you had such a great success and just such a great story around that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm originally, from California. I played three sports like most people growing up, but was lucky enough to, fall in love with football and be the best at that. But, growing up, I grew up, in an abusive, alcoholic household, all the above. So I used football as my way out of my situation. I was lucky enough, to get a full ride scholarship. And then once I finally, officially hung up my cleats after doing some professional opportunities and stuff like that, I jumped straight into what I'm doing now. I'm a journalist and then also an author. So on journalism side, I cover, finance and stuff like that. And then, as you mentioned, just released my debut book, Only Way Out. The book itself is loosely based on stuff that I've dealt with in my life or been around in my life. And yeah, pretty much that's my little background of me.
And I mean, I haven't finished the book yet. I'm sorry, guys. I usually try to finish it. It's been a long summer. But what I really love about the book so far is how honest it is without being like, it's not overly dramatic. Like we've had so many conversations, like you can tell when someone's being honest, when someone's being transparent and like trying to tell their true story. And I think what makes your book so unique too is like you're telling the whole side of it. Like a lot of times in media and in TV, we hear stories about athletes who use sports as the only way out. We don't really show like all the parts of that and everything that comes with that. And you really do that at just starting off with first, the main character of your book, Jalen, has this really unique relationship with his younger brother, Elijah, in which he is Elijah's like caretaker. Like he is his number one guardian in most ways. Everyone in the community knows this. Elijah certainly knows this. And both of their parents know this and kind of don't really get in the way of that relationship, really. Like they kind of see it as like this, I don't know, it's just like a really divine and special relationship. I think that's a huge thing that we don't see a lot in athletics. There's a lot there. Can you talk a little bit more about that relationship, especially when it comes to sports, using football as a way out of a situation, but then you also have this family member or this responsibility?
Yeah, for sure. So that's loosely based on my own life. I don't have a little brother, but I have a little sister. And, that's how most of my life was growing up too. Being an athlete, but also, making sure I'm helping take care of her and do those things. Like you said, that's a part of sports I think we miss a lot. Like we think it's just about the sport or just about, the big dramatic things that people are dealing with in their life. But sometimes it's just as simple as, you have a younger sibling that you're trying to take care of. So that's something I really wanted to show within it. And then also, with the book itself, like Elijah doesn't like sports, and sports isn't a part of it. He likes that his brother is good at it and he wants to be a part of it. But, he has other passions and stuff outside of it, which was similar to my sister where, she supported me in my endeavors in sports, but it wasn't those things. So yeah, I think, the combination of both of those things, I think is a lot for a lot of people to deal with, but it's a lot of the story that people just don't really see. I've had so many teammates, and I'm sure you have had too, where it's like, on top of being a student athlete, they're a full-time caregiver for, not just one, sibling, but multiple siblings and stuff like that. So I think it's a part of being a student athlete that a lot of people, I don't think they get to see, but it's something I want to include in my book just because it was so prevalent to me and then people in my life.
Yeah. And honestly, like regardless of your situation at home, like for so many people that have siblings, like being a sibling and being part of a family unit really influences your athletic career and what you're able to do. Maybe you have an older sibling who played a sport and now you also play that sport. Or maybe you're not able to participate in as many activities outside of school because you have to share resources and time with your siblings. I grew up an only child, but I remember all of the sports siblings who would hang out around our volleyball tournament or our basketball tournament, just wreaking havoc or whatever, because they're just there and they can't just sit at home, right? Like that's such a big thing. And that's such an interesting dynamic in the book that I hope people see too.
No, I love that you pointed that out because I think a lot of people don't realize that too. Because I remember the same thing too. Being at AAU tournaments for basketball, and everyone always has little siblings, running around causing havoc, like you said. So I'm glad you noticed that too. That's cool.
The point of the show is, like I always say, it's the glossary for student athletes, like dealing with anything. And a huge part of my life has been both of my parents talk about college sports as being their only way of affording college or being able to go to the universities that they did go to, right? And being able to get the degree that they did, or even just being able to afford it. I feel like that's a huge thing that a lot of people go through in college, but don't necessarily talk about it. at Cornell and even at Syracuse, it was really common to have people in the athletic department who were first generation students. And it's such a weird experience at a school like a Cornell or at a Syracuse where that is not the majority of the students. Can you talk a little bit about like that?
Yeah, for sure. I've said it on other podcasts I've been on before, but like I honestly I don't know where I would have been if it weren't for sports. Like I don't think I probably would have went to school, to be honest, because you either pay, which I knew I didn't have the money to do, or, use sports as your way out. And I think, that itself is something special, to be able to like leave school debt free, and have a 4-year degree that, a lot of people that I grew up around didn't get to have those opportunities, and that's something and that I don't take advantage of. It's something that I love too, because I also got my degree in what I love, which is journalism and writing. So that also, allowed me to propel myself outside of, just my sport too. Because I think so many people are like always so focused on sport driven, it's like, well, I got sports and I got a full ride scholarship to play sports. But for me, like the school aspect was something that excited me too, because it's like, I am like a nerd and I did want to learn, but if I didn't have a full ride, I knew I wouldn't be able to get those things. And then now it's like, I got won awards as a journalist now just based off of my career, my athletic career, being able to have a full-time degree and do those kind of things. So I think it's those two things, just being able to leverage, your athletic career to also pursue other stuff outside of sports, like I said, and journalism too.
That's a good point. I love that you brought that up. So that was actually a note that I had is like, I wanted to get your opinion on the idea of like only way out, where sports are the only way that people who don't have as many opportunities or don't have resources can eventually get those. I think that's one that's like very obvious, like media heavy. Like in the book, Jalen was watching a documentary or something that came on TV about a football player who was able to buy a house for his family. And then he was like, I want a house for me and my brother, so I'm going to go play football. Even though I've never touched a football or played an organized sport in my life. Why do you feel like sports comes up as that way out compared to like academics or music or even like trade school, right? Like, why is it sports?
Yeah, I think it's all the things you said. It's, media. And especially when you grow up in situations similar to Jalen, similar to myself, or similar to my friend, it's like there's only so much you see. You're not really seeing the story of a pianist using his piano to get his way out of a situation. You're seeing a documentary of a football player or a basketball player using that way to leverage themselves out of their situation. So I think it's just exposure and media exposure and, the things that we see only growing up, but that's something that I'm trying to change the narrative on too. To be completely honest, like I love sports and loved it, but I never loved football. I loved what football could do for me, to be completely honest. Football for me, I knew was my way out. I loved other sports like baseball and basketball before those, I loved football, but I just happened to be the best at it. So I try to, when I talk to younger people or even younger athletes, like, sports doesn't have to be the end all be all, especially in today's day and age. You go in technology and get a full ride scholarship, like you mentioned, being an instrument and those kind of things. But I think, to answer the question, it's just like, it's all we really see. Like, and, myself growing up, I didn't see, an author who used his writing as his way out of a situation. You know what I mean? I saw, the likes of athletes do it. So I think that would be those things. But I think there's so many more opportunities now versus just even, we're both young, but versus when we were both growing up, there's not as many opportunities, I think, to, grow and expand outside of sports,
Yeah. And I think too, like there's a big discrepancy too, in sometimes the education and like just the perception, right? Like at schools and different things of what students are even capable of doing. Do you feel like growing up, do you feel like your teachers in the schools that you went to, I don't know, prepared you or encouraged you to make that an option? Like, hey, we're going to get you the best GPA and we're going to expose you to all these schools and different things where you could even think about getting a scholarship beyond athletics. Was that even a thing that came up?
Honestly, no. Like, now that you say it, like, I don't ever, remember those kind of things. And part of it might just because, when you're a good athlete, people just only kind of check you into one box typically, no matter even if you have a good GPA or good test scores or not. They're like, you're just an athlete for the most part. That's another thing. I try to talk to kids. I'm like, you don't have to just be an athlete. Like, you can love school and have good grades and still, have all the opportunities I have. But I think it's like the media, aspect that we only see the kind of stories of, the Super Bowl winners that get out or, the NBA championship winners or, whatever it may be. We never necessarily see just like quote unquote normal people using, academia to get themselves out of a situation. But I think that narrative needs to change because you can use it and can do honestly so much more for the world outside of just, what you can do on a field or on a court.
Again, it's not the thing you're supposed to say. You're like, I did love football.
No, yeah.
You recognize like that, like you had a strategy from a very young age. Like, how did you develop that? Like, how do you deal with that? That seems like that's a very mental thing. I just think of like all of my teammates and even myself, where there wasn't a lot of pressure beyond, like, it was kind of like, go do what you love to do, go do what you have fun to, like, and there's so much pressure. Like, there's people who do come from privileged backgrounds who aren't dealing with like food insecurity, who aren't dealing with physical abuse, who aren't dealing with these things in their neighborhoods, who are mentally falling apart. Like, it makes sense. So, but then you have this whole other piece of it, right? Like, how did you come up with, like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know what to say. Do you have anything to say to that?
No, yeah. Like, it's honestly like the story of Jalen Seen, that football player. Like, that's what I saw. It was, after a football player, his name's Patrick Willis. He was a linebacker for the 49ers. And I saw his story. I'm like, whoa, like, you don't just have to live in survival mode all the time. Like, you can leverage something that you're good at to, get those kind of things. And, like, I didn't have any other role models outside of Patrick Willis was one for me. Or like watch Kobe Bryant. I'm a Cali kid. So it's like, seeing those things. But then also like outside of sports too, like I'm a big Nipsey Hussle fan, and he's a rapper from LA, rest in peace. But like seeing him, how he just hustled no matter what out of his situation and kept running the race that he was on. So those were the kind of things that kept me going, was seeing, guys that I felt like grew up or had worse circumstances than me were able to make it. And, the one thing that separated them versus everyone else is that they just didn't quit. And then I think there's just something to be said, like, you're living in survival mode. When you're constantly living in survival mode, that's all you know how to do is just survive. So it's like, I almost don't process it until after I was out of it, like how much really went into, the added pressures that I was facing outside of just being, a student athlete, which we all know is, hard in itself without all those added stuff.
Yeah, I feel like you, and also throughout the whole book, Jalen talks a lot about different things that would come up in the normal high school experience that he rejects or avoids because it's a distraction. And what most people would call that distraction is just like being a kid. So girls, going to parties, having friends, were all considered distractions. Like, how has that affected your life or affected the people that you grew up with? Like, was that a change that you had to make as you got older?
I mean, honestly, it's still a change I'm still dealing with, like just being comfortable with like being loved, accepting love and those kind of things. Because for so long, it was like I had this tunnel vision of like, I need to get myself out of my situation and my sister. So it was like, I have two. But now that, we've pretty much done both of them, it's like almost like, oh man, like, how do I have friendships? How do I have a healthy relationship with a significant other? How do I do those things? So it's still something, I'm still learning myself, but, I go to therapy, I do all these things to take care of myself so I can do those things. But forever, those were like seen as distractions to me. And, I see my friends who grew up in similar situations as me that partook in, partying or drugs and alcohol, and it doesn't, necessarily end up as good for them because to some extent of survival, they are a distraction for me being able to survive. But I'm trying to be better at it now. I learned how to like I said, just accept love and accept, friendship, accept those kind of things. But it's all a balance and, figuring out what works for you. But it'll probably be a lifelong journey for me, but yeah, we're still learning.
Do you have any advice or like little tricks that you used or wished you used to give like for student athletes who are in that, who are like trying to stay on the straight and narrow and realize what they have to lose, but also, want to experience that typical like high school or college experience?
I think like anything in life, it's all balance, and I think everyone has their own different kind of balance. Some are more apt to, alcoholism and drug addictions and those things, but others may not, so it's all about finding the balance of, you don't need to be completely sober, or you don't need to like have no friends and no partying, but it's all about what you can figure out that works for you. And then I think just, trusting your gut in a lot of those situations. Like a lot of times I think you put yourself in situations, you're like, I know this is probably not where I need to be right now. You know what I mean? And I always say like 99.9% of the time your gut doesn't lie, so just trust your gut, I think, in those situations. But as you're trusting your gut in those situations, try to find that balance that works for you, and don't compare yourself to like, well, why can he or she do this? It's like, no, what can work for me as I'm, chasing both dreams.
Yeah, I love that. I want to go back to this like question of survival.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a huge thing right now around like toxic coaching or toxic environments. And there's so much about mental health in sports and like supporting athletes and like this maximizing the college experience, right? And there's parts of it that sometimes I'm like, are we thinking about the whole like bigger picture, right? You know, the athletes need this extra resource or this thing or like revenue share or all these different things to add to the experience that could be potentially taking, you know, like other parts away.
Yeah.
Right. Like, have you thought about that at all? Like as these revenue share conversations come up or like maximizing the college experience, are there parts of it to you that feel like, I don't know, that they might be missing the picture? Like, how does it all fit in for you?
No, I mean, I think about these things a lot because obviously, you know, I have kids that I know that are still in college, but then also, you know, friends that are still in college and doing those things. And, you know, I think the advice that I would give is kind of goes back to what I was saying previously, is that balance, you know what I mean? And remember, like, I feel like we live in this world where everyone thinks we need to be robotic and be perfect, but it's okay to be a human, you know, if you need to take a break from, you know, NIL, practice schedule, all the like, that's okay. And allowing yourself that time. Like you're an 18-year-old kid, you know what I mean? You shouldn't need to like understand revenue sharing and all these things. You know, you should just be focusing on having fun, you know, with your friends at a sport that you're getting free school to do. I think we're trying to force everyone to grow up too quickly. Life's going to do that anyways. So I think it's just, you know, being balanced in that approach too. Because obviously it's a great opportunity for a lot of people, but you can get overwhelmed in it. Because I mean, just being a student athlete alone is overwhelming at parts of it, you know? So I think it's just finding that balance. It's, you know, you got to be even keel and just kind of adjust to what you can handle, what you can't handle, but to recognize like, it's okay if I can't handle it myself, or, you know, I need to take a break. Like that's okay.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there. Like, and I tell this, I felt that way, like even my own college experience. It took me until my senior year to really start posting and do NIL and all of that. If I needed a lot of extra money or different things, and I think I would have maybe posted a couple things extra and gotten those like $50 deals or gotten those like food deals to like cover that. But at the same time, like the top benefit of me being a college athlete, although I love it, although the awards and all the different things I've done, is my education and the opportunity that I got. And that alone, like you've already said, can change a life. And but like everyone in your circle and everyone around you, whether like your family, whether you're now getting the job that's going to, you know, cover their expenses, or you're the person in the community that now has a job. Like how many, I can't even explain like how many girls have been in my messages now and are like, I didn't realize I could go to an Ivy League school. Like seeing you do that made me think I could go do that. Right.
Yep.
Like there is so much more that athletes can get in that maybe we do deserve, but like, don't forget how amazing this experience is. I think just like having talked to you like a couple of times now and like reading your book, like it's just something that really, really has stuck with me. And I hope like sticks with my viewers. I just love that.
I do too. And I think we, with so much, like we said, the NIL, the revenue sharing, all those, like we forget just like how important cool education is in itself and the college experience is, you know, just being able to like talk to professors about something that you're genuinely interested in, you know? And I think that's the other thing a lot of people struggle with too, is like, they pick the easiest major that supports their sport versus picking something that they genuinely want to do. So that's the other advice I would say too, is like actually find a degree or a pathway that you actually want to go into. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, they always said this for football growing up. I'm not sure what they said for your sport, but it's like NFL stands for not for long, you know? And so that was always in the back of my head, is like, I know, you know, no matter how far I take football, it's only going to be, you know, I'll be at the oldest 30 years old. But I mean, I still, you know, hopefully have 70 years to live after 30. So it's like, find something that you're actually passionate about. Because that's helped me with my transition off the field too. It's like, I jump straight into something that I love and have passion for and want to keep doing every day.
Yeah, I love that. So far we've talked about the discipline. We've talked about resilience, which is like throughout your entire story. We've talked about foresight and strategic planning and passion. And I think another thing that we should probably talk about before we wrap up is support and community. Like so much of your story and Jalen's story and everything we're talking about is lack of the traditional support roles in our lives, which is like our parents and maybe our like direct family. But the book has, and even what you've said, has so many examples of outside community that we wouldn't expect. Like, what are like those big like roles for you in your life? Like people who filled that like community role or that support role that you think of?
Man, like honestly, in the book itself, you know, there's a coach that takes a liking into Jalen. His name's Coach Buster, and that's named after a coach for me in high school. Rest in peace. He passed away when I was in high school. He was the first person in my life that like truly saw me and supported me for me. And not because I was good at football or those things, but just be who I was as a human. And then just like every step of the way that I've been now, whether I was in junior college or up to my university, like there's been people who've been there that have supported me, whether it be coaches or, once I got to my university, I had my college academic advisor. She took me in and her family took me in, and like I'm a part of their family now. Like I just did her son's wedding. I ordained her son's wedding a few weeks ago, so it's like those people throughout my life. I think so many people grow up in broken homes or, don't necessarily have that traditional family. They're always kind of seeking a family. But I think it's okay. Like you don't have to have a traditional family in the sense of, with that, the mom, dad, 2.5 kids and 3 dogs or whatever, the quote unquote American dream is. I think you can build your own family, from friends, college professors, even, coaches, all the above. It's okay to have that, to not have it. Cause I think a lot of time I was like, man, I wish I had X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, I think comparisons with the joy, so you can only compare your own life to everyone else. And, I'm super grateful to have all the people I have in my life, my chosen family, I like to call it,
Yeah. And I think what's amazing too, like the more you look at other people's lives and like as we get older and like you see people grow up, move out, whatever, you realize that most of those people that you looked at like growing up.
Yep.
my parents might not love this. Like my parents are like got divorced while I was in college, and like everyone from high school is like, wait, we had no idea your parents like got divorced. Like everything like seemed perfect. And like I'm not gonna like air out anything for us, but like you just never know like the people who come across as everything is perfect or who like don't have any problems with their sports or maybe they're the smartest person in school or they have all of the fancy clothes and all of the nicest things. Like things change so fast. You never see the whole story.
That's it right there.
Like another reason that I love like talking with you. I'm so glad that we connected and stuff because it's just so true. It just changes. And again, like you said, comparison is a thief of joy. I love that you say that.
No, it is. And I think the other thing too is just remember we're all human. I think when we're kids and stuff, we tend to put everyone on a pedestal, whether it's our parents or our coaches or teachers or even friends in some instances that we think have it all together. But I think having, emotional intelligence to realize we're all human and to not overjudge someone or overanalyze someone. Oh, they have everything. Everyone's going through something, whether, like you said, they have the fanciest clothes in the world or, they're living off food stamps. Everyone's going through something difficult. But I think it's so important to have that grace for everyone in your life because we're all humans. We're all on a spinning rock trying to figure it out at the end of the day. So I think having that grace is also an important thing to remember for everyone in your life.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for your advice and your vulnerability. Thanks for coming on. Let's talk about it today.
Thanks so much for the time. Check out the book.
Hey guys, it's Sydney. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. If you did, make sure to leave a review and send it to a friend. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you guys next week.